Hi, I'm Eric from Astro Precision. You're hearing my AI voice. In this video, I'll present new features added to the TiltAdjusterV2 application. If you haven't tried the TiltAdjuster instrument with the new app yet, you should. It makes removing tilt from your imaging setup much easier. In this video, I will introduce a new experimental method for finding the calibration blob in complex setups. By complex, I mean cases where more than one blob appears in the imaging window. Finding the correct blob can be difficult, and it becomes harder as more parts of the setup are screwed together. Previously, before the filter wheel was attached by screws to the camera, it was easy to identify the correct blob by rotating the camera. Reflections from the camera moved while filter reflections stayed stationary. That was monochrome. Now, as more color cameras include IR filters, selecting the correct blob has become more difficult. I call this experimental because I've only tested it on my own cameras, with and without filters and reducers. When I enable the required checkboxes, it seems to work quite well. I don't expect it to be perfect for every setup in the first release, since reflections vary between manufacturers even for similar equipment. With feedback from you users and help from AI, we can maybe improve accuracy and support for more setups. Now let's look at how the function actually works. There are two checkboxes you need to set before running the detection, and they're important because they directly affect how the reflections behave. Reducer flattener should be enabled if the reducer is physically part of your optical setup during calibration. Narrowband Ha filter should be enabled if you're performing the adjustment through an H-alpha filter. The feature itself is controlled by the Use Auto Sensor Ranking checkbox. When this is enabled, the Auto Detect button becomes active. Pressing it starts the automatic search for the sensor reflection blob. I'm zooming in on the reflected blobs in the imaging view so we can clearly see what happens when the search begins. Each blob marker has a number on it. This number represents the ranking, where the blob labeled 1 is the system's current best candidate for the calibration blob. If you're using auto mode, that's the blob the system will select. When I press the Auto Detect button, the search starts by analyzing images at different exposure levels, beginning with the shortest exposure. The system steps through the exposures one by one until it either finds a reliable match or reaches the end of the range. Once the search is complete, the ranking should clearly indicate which blob is correct, and the exposure time will automatically be set to a usable value. If the blob ranked as 1 is now marked as the calibration blob, you're ready to begin calibration. The marker will also show whether you can proceed using auto mode or manual mode. If the blob is centered and stable, use auto. If not, switch to manual. I hope you noticed that the ranking changed. And yes, that's exactly what should happen. To prove that this ranking change is correct, I'm going to use the filter wheel as an additional verification method. I start by selecting the filter wheel from the device menu under filter wheel. After making that selection, the upper right section of the window becomes active, and this is where you can connect to the filter wheel and control which filter is in place. Now I switch to the red filter. Since the red filter does not produce a reflection, the only visible blob should be the true sensor blob, and as you can see, the blob detected by the search remains in exactly the same position in the window. This confirms that the ranking was correct and that the system identified the right blob. If you switch off auto detect, remember that you'll need to run the detection again to ensure the result is correct. I'll switch back to the hydrogen alpha filter so we get multiple blobs again. I also switch off auto mode. That lets me demonstrate a small but useful feature that can help if you have trouble keeping track of the correct blob. This feature works in all modes, not just auto detect. If you hold Control and click on a blob, that blob becomes locked as the selected one. This prevents the system from switching to another blob when several are close together, or when normal mode might toggle between them or jump to the wrong one. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this feature is still experimental and it probably won't work perfectly for everyone on the first attempt. I'll continue improving it, and I hope this serves as a good starting point. Creating a function like this takes a lot of time, so feedback from you as a user is really important when deciding how much further to develop it. So please let me know if you think it's worth the effort. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.